When we hear the word Islam, it's easy to think of it as just one single thing. There's this really powerful idea of a global community, the Ummah. But like any huge world tradition, the reality is so much more complex and honestly way more fascinating than the headlines ever let on. So let's pull back that curtain and explore the many different worlds of Islam.
And that brings us right to the heart of it, right? While Muslims all over the world feel this deep connection, calling each other brother and sister, the faith has also seen some serious internal conflicts right from the very beginning. So how do we square that ideal of one united community with the reality of so many different interpretations and deep historical divides?
Okay, so the biggest and oldest split in Islam started with a single massive question right after the Prophet Muhammad died. Who's in charge now? And this wasn't just some political squabble, it was a decision that would end up shaping the faith for well over 1,000 years.
So this one question basically split the community into two camps. On one side, you had the group that would become the Sunnis. They argued for community consensus. They believed the Prophet's closest friends should choose the next leader, and their pick was a man named Abu Bakr. But on the other side were the Shia, which literally means the partisans of Ali. For them, this was never about a vote. It was about bloodline. They were convinced that leadership had to stay within the Prophet's family, specifically with his cousin and son-in-law, Ali.
And this disagreement, well, it didn't just stay a friendly debate. Things escalated. After 3 other leaders, Ali did eventually become the 4th caliph, but his rule was cut short. He was assassinated. But the real, absolute breaking point, the moment there was no turning back, came in 680 CE. That's when Ali's son, Hussein, was killed in the Battle of Karbala. That event cemented the split for good.
For Shia Islam, Karbala became more than just a date in a history book. It became their foundational story. It created this incredibly powerful narrative built on themes of being the oppressed minority, of righteous leaders being martyred, and, this is key, a sacred duty to stand up and fight against injustice no matter what the odds are. And this gets to a really crucial difference. The divide became about more than just who should be in charge. It became about what a leader is. For Sunnis, the leader, the caliph, is a protector, a political and military guardian of the faith. But for the Shia, the leader, the imam, is something else entirely. He's seen as a direct descendant of the Prophet, a divinely inspired, even infallible spiritual guide. We're talking two totally different concepts of authority.
And you can see this historical split in the numbers today. Around the world, about 85% of Muslims are Sunni. They are the clear majority. The other 15% are Shia. And this majority-minority dynamic, well, it shaped centuries of history, and it's often led to some really tough times for Shia communities.
All right, let's pivot. We're going to move to a completely different kind of diversity in Islam. This one isn't about political divides at all. It's about an inner, mystical journey. Let's talk about Sufism, the path that's all about seeking a direct, personal experience of God.
And really, who better to introduce it than the great 13th century mystic Rumi? This line, "Be melting snow, wash yourself of yourself," just perfectly captures the heart of Sufism. The whole goal is to dissolve the ego, right? To get yourself out of the way so you can have this profound, direct connection with the divine. Now, the Sufi path isn't just one single thing. It kind of flows in a few different streams. You've got the ascetic stream, which is all about simplicity and letting go of worldly stuff. Then there's the contemplative stream, which uses practices like chanting and meditation to get totally absorbed in God. And then there's the devotional path, the path of the heart, which uses the language of a lover desperately longing for their beloved. So probably the most famous image of Sufism is the whirling dervishes. But this isn't just a performance for tourists. It's a deeply spiritual ritual. The whole dance is a symbol of a journey towards God. And look at the hands. The right hand is open to the sky, receiving God's grace, and the left hand points down to the earth, connecting heaven and earth through the dancer. It's really powerful stuff.
Okay, let's switch gears again, from the spiritual to the political. Fast forward to the 18th and 19th centuries. The Muslim world is facing a massive crisis: European colonization. This was a huge shock, and it forced this deep soul-searching. The big questions were, what went wrong? And what on earth do we do now?
Broadly speaking, 3 major answers came out of this. The first group basically said, we lost our power because we strayed from true Islam. The solution? Reject the West completely and go back to the source. The second group argued the total opposite. We failed because we didn't modernize. We have to imitate the West, become more secular. And then there was a third path, a middle way, Islamic modernism. They argued, hey, let's revive our own great traditions of reason and science, and then selectively adapt the good ideas from the West.
Now, one movement from that reject the West camp became incredibly influential, and that's Wahhabism. It's a very strict, puritanical, literalist take on Islam, and it sees a lot of common Shia and Sufi practices, like honoring saints, as dangerous heresies. Now, it might have just stayed a small movement, but it made a crucial alliance with the royal family of Saudi Arabia. That partnership gave it huge global influence, funding mosques and schools all over the world.
And all of this feeds into the rise of what people often call political Islam, or Islamism. It's a really broad movement, but the core idea is pretty much captured in the famous motto of the Muslim Brotherhood: Islam is the answer. It's the belief that the principles of Islam shouldn't just be for your private life, they should be the foundation for everything: politics, law, economics, the whole shebang.
All right, let's bring this whole story home. Because Islam is one of the fastest growing religions in America, and it has a character and a diversity here that's totally unique. The community has really deep roots and a profile that might surprise you.
So get this. This statistic really catches people off guard. About 30% of all Muslims in the U.S. are African American. For many, converting to Islam is seen as reconnecting with an ancestral faith, especially since historians estimate that maybe as many as 20% of the African slaves brought to America were originally Muslim.
And here's the other side of that story. As a whole, American Muslims are highly educated, they're professionally successful, and they're really well integrated into the American middle class. In fact, they're more likely to have a college degree than the general population. This paints a very, very different picture from what you often see in the news.
But here's the paradox. This is the real tension. Despite this incredible level of success and integration, about half of all American Muslims say they've experienced discrimination. So you have this push and pull, right? Feeling like a loyal American, but also fearing that maybe you aren't fully accepted by your neighbors. So that leaves us with one last big question. We've seen the ancient Sunni-Shia divide, the deep mysticism of the Sufis, the complex political movements, and this totally unique American experience. Islam isn't just one story. It's this rich, complex, constantly evolving tapestry. And as it keeps growing right here in America, what do you think its next chapter is going to look like?